The man who became known to many as Azobasu, or the Ape Man of Dotties, quickly became a tabloid sensation. Azo has since become one of the best-known ape man cases in recent history, appearing in travel and adventure magazines. Some tabloids even named him the missing link between the Neanderthals and modern humans. He was found to be living in the Valley of Dotties, near the town of Skora in Morocco during the 1930s. Azo has since become surrounded by speculation. Though it's widely thought he suffered from a type of microcephaly, his origins have become a story of legend. One of the most common is that Azo was an ape-human hybrid. It was first thought that a human had mated with a species of ape, which then resulted in the creation of Azo. His characteristics resembled that of an ape and not of a human, with a clear mental deformity. He lived in a cave fed on dates, berries, and other dead animals, and used primitive tools while communicating via grunts, rather than any known human language. His forehead was sunken and his arms were long, almost down to his knees. In 1956, the French writer Jean Billet, alongside ethnologist Marcel Gommet, went to study the case of the Moroccan ape man. While they studied him, Azo unfortunately died at 60 years of age, but his alleged sisters, Issa and Hakaya, lived on. Scientists concluded that the three siblings suffered from a case of microcephaly, but their cases are still widely speculated. The disappearance of Rosalind Belangle was born in 1948 in northern Rhodesia to British parents, but her family moved to live in South Africa, living for a short time in Johannesburg. By 1968, Rosalind was studying speech and drama at the University of Cape Town. In August 1969, she was staying with two friends in Nisa Forest when she walked off and never returned. She was known to be a hippie and allegedly the high priestess in a group that referred to themselves as the Cosmic Butterfly. Her disappearance sparked a 2-week-long search, which proved to be fruitless, although it did bring up some other interesting information. There wasn't an identified body discovered in the search, police files went missing, and there have since been some unconfirmed sightings of Rosalind around the place where she used to live, in the Devottican area of Cape Town. Albert Grundling of the Department of History at Stellenbosch University said the following: "She was a marginal figure on the fringes of society. Yet, as an observer, she also provided a lens through which wider developments could be observed." Albert became aware of Rosalind's story after a guide had mentioned her to him and his wife while touring the Nisa Forest. He then saw a picture of her from the Scope magazine back at the Berrydale Hotel. This piqued his curiosity. He began to conduct his own research. He traveled to the local library and began to dig through old documents relating to the case. In the 1980s, the police officially declared Rosalind dead and the search was called off. One theory is that she may have taken her own life. Grundling's research led him on a path to discover that Rosalind was a striking figure physically, but described as being insecure, depressed, and neurotic, and obsessed with the end of the world. Exactly what happened to Rosalind still remains a mystery, but her case still continues to intrigue researchers to this day. The remarkable journey of Anton Palapa. Anton Palapa is a Canadian man who shocked the world with a journey that ended more than 6,500 miles away from his home. Missing for 5 years, Anton had simply disappeared without a trace from his home in Vancouver back in 2012. But after being away from his home for so long, he was eventually found in the Amazon jungle. Anton managed to trek all the way from Vancouver to the Amazon rainforest, with little more than the clothes on his back, making the journey largely barefoot. The former humanitarian worker had worked all over Canada for various organizations, while suffering from suspected schizophrenia, which caused his family great concern when he failed to show up back at his home. After 5 years, the family had given up on hope. This was until they randomly got a call from the Brazilian police force just after Christmas. A Canadian-born Brazilian cop, Helenis Campos, spotted Anton after recognizing him to be a foreigner. She originally thought he was a beggar. She saw Anton walking down a dirt track in bare feet, unwashed and unshaven, wearing Bermuda shorts and a vest. He was carrying no passport or any other form of identification. The police officer was eager to find out who the man was. With the help of several international agencies and embassies, she was able to track down his family back in Canada, who agreed to fly to Brazil to be reunited with Anton. His family were stunned. Though they had given up all hope in finding Anton, 5 years later they found him at the end of his incredible journey. Anton, who has since been put back on his schizophrenia medication, had managed to travel through at least 10 different countries from his home in Canada, including the United States, Mexico, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, Venezuela, Argentina, and finally Brazil. He managed to travel through all these countries with no passport and with little more than the clothes on his back. Anton's brother said he had traveled all that way for one purpose, to visit the National Library of Buenos Aires in Argentina. After he had made it all that way to the library, he was denied entry because he had no identification. This is when he decided to travel to Brazil instead. Anton later described how he managed to survive. He said he had picked fruit and other berries along the way, scavenging through bins to try and find clothes and other food. He also said that he was robbed of the very little things he did have, and this happened numerous times while he was on his colossal trek. Yet, while he ran into some bad people on his amazing journey, he also said he received more generosity, especially in recent times. "I've never felt alone," he said. "There's been a lot of thinking for years. Sleeping in the open. It's very simple to live. We do not need many things." While he was trekking the Amazon, he had managed to avoid all kinds of dangerous animals, including highly venomous spiders and snakes, as well as jaguars and caiman. After spending 5 years on the road, however, once Anton had been transferred to a Brazilian mental institute to await his family's arrival, his brother claimed that Anton's health began to deteriorate. He had spent years surviving off the streets and nature and found it hard to adapt to life indoors. His family arrived and Anton began to regain his health after seeing his family once again. His brother said, "We got him just in time." Anton went on to tell the BBC, "I know that I am very lucky to be alive. I am very happy to be able to return to my family." Despite having spent so long in South America, he still can't speak any Portuguese or Spanish and found it very difficult to have any other human interaction during his time on the road. He would sometimes catch a ride as a stowaway on a truck whenever he could, but still traveled most of his journey on foot. Now Anton has since returned to Canada to live with his brother, sister-in-law, and their children in downtown Toronto. His story is one of hardship and inspiration. So what do you make of these interesting stories? Many people say that truth is stranger than fiction. That appears to be the case in regards to these strange and mysterious coincidences that are riddled all throughout history and may lead many to believe that perhaps there is something of a supernatural connection. Be it a mysterious all-knowing force or just the human mind's amazing ability to find patterns in the world around us, these mysterious coincidences exist and will make you question whether or not they truly are coincidences. So today we'll be going over these 3 mysterious coincidences. How 15 mundane miracles saved 15 lives from an explosion. Once in a lifetime, or maybe not even that, do we witness or experience a miracle. So what if I told you that on March the 1st, 1950, in a seemingly normal town in Beatrice, Nebraska, 15 miracles occurred on the same night. Westside Baptist Church in Beatrice, Nebraska would have regular church choir practice every week, would usually meet around 7:15 p.m. for practice to take place at around 7:20 p.m. So what makes this a crazy story? Well, unfortunately, at 7:25 p.m., a previously undetected gas leak caused an explosion that would completely level the church and even damage nearby buildings in the process. The coincidence? Not one of the 15 expected people were in the church. Every single person had been late for one reason or another. So what actually happened? Reverend Walter Klemper, his wife and his daughter had been ready to leave and were set to arrive at the church on time until the Reverend's daughter, Marilyn Ruth, just so happened to notice a stain on her dress. This meant that her mother had to go and get another dress ready and iron it, so they ended up being late. All 3 of them were still at home when the church exploded. The church pianist, Marilyn Paul and her mother, who is also the choir's director, had actually planned on arriving at the church 30 minutes early to prepare some things. Instead, Marilyn ended up oversleeping from a nap. Whilst napping, Marilyn's mother had tried to wake her several times and eventually managed to at around 7:15 p.m. Not wanting to leave without her daughter, Marilyn's mother waited for her to get dressed and ready for church. Whilst Marilyn was getting ready, the church exploded. Lucille Jones and Dorothy Wood were in high school at the time. Both attended choir practice together and were normally always on time. However, on March 1, 1950, Lucille was strangely insistent on staying at home and listening to a radio show until it finished at around 7:30 p.m. Dorothy waited with her and were both still at home when the church exploded. Royina and Sadie Estes were sisters who had actually left for church on that evening, but their car would not start. They ended up calling another member of the choir, LaDonna von der Griff, who also had a reputation for being early. However, LaDonna was in the middle of completing geometry homework and wanted to finish it before leaving. All three of them ended up being late and were not in the church when it exploded. Was also on track to be early, but instead sat down at his desk to finish an important letter and was still sitting at his desk when the church exploded. Mrs. Schuster and Susan, her daughter, were on their way to church as normal but had to make a quick stop to help Mrs. Schuster's mother with preparation for a missionary meeting. They ended up getting delayed and were not at the church when it exploded. He had to get his sons ready by himself, which took longer than usual. All three of them ended up being late and were not at the church when it exploded. Joyce Black happened to live just across the street from the church, and this time there was no real coincidence. She was just feeling lazy as it was cold outside and warm inside. She was waiting until the last moment to leave in which she wouldn't be too late. She was not at the church when it exploded. The Westside Baptist Church was completely destroyed at 7:25 p.m., and not a single person that would normally have been there was there. Was this divine intervention or just a series of coincidences? Twins killed by the same taxi. In 1975, Hamilton, Bermuda, a 17-year-old boy was in a fatal accident whilst riding around his hometown of Hamilton on his moped. But what makes this tragedy a coincidence? Well, this is exactly a year after his brother was also in a fatal accident riding the exact same moped. What's more is both brothers passed away not only whilst riding the same moped, at the same intersection, and were both hit by the same taxi, driven by the same taxi driver, carrying the same passenger that was in the taxi when the first brother's life was taken. This is an incredible coincidence and a devastating tragedy. The brothers Erskine and Neville Eben were both 17 when they passed away, and both collisions happened in July. This coincidence, however, may not be as crazy as once thought. You've probably even heard this one before, but maybe not the facts. As you may have already noticed, how could twins that were both 17 years old pass away a year apart? Well, they were not twins, despite the newspapers at the time reporting so. They were brothers born within a year of each other. Another thing you may have noticed is that, again, despite being reported as both brothers being hit at the same intersection, it was actually not the same intersection and the accidents occurred up the road from each other. It has also been noted that whilst the accidents occurred within a very small radius of each other, that the local area, their hometown, is also a very small area in relation to other towns and cities. Whilst these small facts make this less coincidental, it is still a devastating coincidence in which two 17-year-old brothers' lives were taken away within a short radius of each other, riding the same moped just over a year apart by the same taxi with the same driver and the same passenger. Hoover Dam death coincidence on December 20, 1921. Whilst carrying out a location survey for the development of the Hoover Dam, a surveying crew were sadly hit by a flash flood, and a man named John Gregory Tierney was swept away, never to be found in the unforgiving Colorado River. This would be one of the first accidents that occurred during the construction of the Hoover Dam. On the exact same day, December 20, 1935, the dam construction site suffered its last casualty when a construction worker sadly fell to his death from one of the intake towers. The man that fell, Patrick William Tierney, was John Gregory Tierney's son. Where did it all begin? John and his wife's 3-year-old daughter sadly passed away, so the young Tierneys ended up moving to Arizona. This would be where John Tierney found work with the survey crew right at the start of construction of the Hoover Dam. Not long after, John would be tragically swept away by the Colorado River. Patrick was 12 when his father passed away, and upon hearing the devastating news, Patrick and his mother would move back to Missouri, where they had moved from years prior. Patrick would spend the rest of his childhood in Missouri, and during his high school years he met a girl named Hazel. They married in August 1931, and their son, also named Patrick Gregory Tierney, was born a year later. During the Depression, the small family packed up and headed west in search of work. Patrick Sr. would end up finding work at the biggest construction project in the USA at the time, the Hoover Dam. It was here, 14 years to the day, after his father John tragically passed away, that Patrick Sr. would fall to his untimely death whilst working on the dam. Father and son were both killed in accidents during the construction of the famous dam 14 years apart to the day. This truly heartbreaking coincidence is almost unfathomable. Both accidents also ended up being one of the first and the last that occurred during construction. Both their names are now on a plaque close by to the dam so that they may never be forgotten. But what do you make of these 3 crazy coincidences? There are numerous cases of alleged time slips and dimensional travel, but some are more mysterious than others. Some of the most famous cases still have experts baffled and continue to intrigue researchers to this day. So today we'll be taking a look at these 3 mysterious cases of time travel. Carol Chase McKelney. In 2006, Carol Chase McKelney was driving to her home in San Bernardino, California, but had decided to stop off and visit her hometown of Riverside. Carol was left confused when she arrived. The location was right. After all, it was the place where she had spent a lot of time, so she knew it well. But having arrived at the right geographical location, the area was far from how she remembered it. She was unable to locate her childhood home and the homes of her other family members that she knew so well. The numbers of the houses were still correct, but the numbers she had remembered were now non-existent. In fact, none of the houses in the area looked familiar to her. She decided to go check on the cemetery where she knew her grandparents were buried. But when she got there, Carol couldn't find their graves. All that remained was a plot of fenced-off, overgrown weeds. Carol was confused. Was she really in the right town? She decided to explore some more, and she came across some landmarks that were familiar to her. The local college and middle school were still standing, just as she had remembered them. Carol pulled onto University Avenue, a place that was normally busy with people going out to restaurants, hotels, and other shops, but she found it to be an unkempt, graffiti-covered place, and something about the people there scared her. The residents were not acting normal. They had a sinister way about them, and she didn't feel safe enough to get out of her car. She soon decided to leave her hometown of Riverside and return to Paris. Carol was adamant she had stumbled into a parallel dimension, a dimension which her hometown was a creepier version than the one she was so familiar with. It was an event that shook her up and one that left her completely confused as to what had happened that day. She would return to Riverside just a few years later to attend the funeral of her father. He was to be buried in the same cemetery as her grandparents. When she arrived, she found herself in the town she knew and loved. She only encountered the Riverside of her believed parallel dimension once. Carol's experience has now become one of the most famous cases of dimensional travel. Her story continues to baffle researchers. Lorena Garcia was a well-educated 41-year-old woman. On what seemed to be another normal day in July 2008, Lorena woke up just like any other. As she went about her normal daily routine, she seemed to notice small details that were out of place. She became increasingly aware that something wasn't quite right. She could remember the sheets and pajamas that she went to bed in, but the ones she woke up in were different. She put these details down to confusion and continued to go about her daily routine. She got in her car and drove to the place where she worked. She knew the drive well as part of her daily routine for the past 20 years. She eventually arrived at the place she had worked at for so long. Upon arriving, her confusion got the better of her once again. She walked to the department where she worked only to find that it was no longer there. The location was the same. The department wasn't. There was a different name tag on the door of the office she had worked from, and to make things appear stranger, she met her boss. But this boss was someone she could never recall meeting before. She decided to check the personal information on her credit cards, driver's license, and work ID. These all seemed to confirm what she thought. They showed the same name, same picture, same numbers, and same home address. Confused as to what was going on, Lorena decided it was best to take a sick day and head home. When she arrived, she found the man with whom she had separated 6 months ago was in her house. He was acting strange, like the separation had never happened, and like the two were still together. The person she had been in a relationship with for the past 4 months was nowhere to be seen. She hired a private detective eager to know where he had gone, but his whereabouts remained a mystery. No trace of him or his family could be identified, and there was no sign of him at the place where Lorena knew he lived. Lorena Garcia's case is another of the most famous examples of alleged travel to an alternate dimension. Lorena, however, was unable to travel back to the previous dimension. She believed she woke up here and is unable to go back to her previous life. Though some skeptics believe her experiences are due to a neurological malfunction, Lorena firmly believes she has traveled to another dimension of existence. 4 girls and the canyon. 4 girls had spent their Saturday at a rodeo in Pioche in May 1972. With the rodeo over, the girls began their journey back to Southern Utah University. Their route home would see them cross the desolate Utah-Nevada state line at approximately 10 p.m. It was here that they came across a peculiar fork in the highway. They decided to take the left turning and head through Gadiunton Canyon. As they were driving, they suddenly noticed the black asphalt turn to white cement. The girls thought they must have taken a wrong turning and decided to turn around and head back toward the fork in the highway. As they were heading back, however, they noticed a landscape that they were sure they hadn't passed on the way. They were now driving past grain fields and ponderosa lines. The desert they had been driving through previously had vanished. Confused, the girls decided to ask for help. They came across a roadside tavern and thought it was best to ask a local for directions. This plan was quickly abandoned after one of the girls began screaming hysterically. The girls claimed they had seen 4 egg-shaped vehicles mounted on tricycle wheels with bright lights on top, chasing after them. They hit the road fast and scared, and the white cement suddenly turned back to the normal black asphalt they had remembered from. Desert. They had returned to the desert that they were familiar with, but in the mass confusion they found themselves wrecking the car in a creek, leaving them with 3 flat tires and with no means of getting help. The 4 girls decided to wait it out until morning before taking a hike to Highway 56, where they had managed to flag down a state trooper. They told the trooper how they had ended up where they had, but the trooper was obviously skeptical and found the whole story to be bizarre. However, their story became even more mysterious when he noticed the tire tracks from the Chevrolet that the girls had been driving had ended suddenly over 200 meters into the desert. How the girls ended up over 3 kilometers north of the highway with no evidence of their journey was baffling. The girls believed they had traveled to another dimension, and just like the others, their story has become one of the most famous cases of dimensional travel. This is probably the most baffling of the cases mentioned, as there were 4 witnesses to the same event. While these events are 3 of the most popular, there are many more cases of people who claim to have experienced a similar sort of thing. What do you make of these time travel cases? Picture is worth 1,000 words, but perhaps some are worth even more than that. Photography, despite being a relatively recent development, has made its mark on history by proving its value in capturing events that otherwise would have been lost to time. Some of these old photographs are merely curious mementos of a bygone era, while others might seem downright unbelievable. Whether it be a mysterious ghostly image or a snapshot of something truly bizarre, Historical photographs provide a window into a world that is long past and allows us to experience second-hand history, even if it doesn't quite make sense in the modern day. So today, we'll be taking a look at 3 instances of odd photography from years past that might leave us with more questions than answers. Mysterious ghost hand in historic photo of linen mill workers. It's easy to find traces of a ghostly presence in some historic photos, with their grainy quality and blurred lines. But these anomalies can be easily explained by the imperfections of the film itself. However, sometimes there is photographic evidence that is much harder to dispute. One such example is a photo from 1900 of 15 young women who were workers at Linen Mill, Northern Ireland, arranged in rows with their arms crossed over their chests. All of the girls have their hands tucked underneath their arms, but one girl has a claw-like disembodied hand wrapped around her neck, resting on her shoulder. The hand appears to be coming from someone standing next to her, with an arm thrown around her as if around a friend. However, the truly ghostly part is that the girl is positioned at the end of a row with nobody next. The hand is very clearly defined and upon zooming in even has sharp details such as shadowing and fingernails. The only girl behind her has her arms tightly crossed, and there is no explanation for where the hand could possibly be coming from. The girl and her companions appear to be entirely unfazed by the presence of a disembodied hand and seem to be entirely unaware of the spectral visitor in their photograph. One of the strangest elements of the photo is that the shape is clearly and undoubtedly a hand, but the lack of a ghostly body attached to the hand cannot give any clues as to the identity of the supernatural photobomber. Skeptics claim that the almost too perfect form of the hand is the result of a skilled Photoshop chop or an optical illusion. While it seems unlikely that such a distinct image could be the chance result of light hitting the camera at an odd angle, Photoshop explanation is more probable, as the photo surfaced after being submitted to a website by a woman whose grandmother was pictured and who claimed that the photo was a family ghost picture. The woman who submitted the picture stated, "I don't really believe in ghosts, but there have been a few odd goings-on around this photo, so I hope this does not cause any more." However, she did not clarify what exactly the odd goings-on could be, and some speculate the whole thing could be a clever hoax. So, is the photo a trick? Or was there truly a ghostly presence lurking around these mill workers that day the photo was taken? We will likely never know, and can only wonder at its strangeness. Picnic at Los Angeles' California alligator farm. The 20th century was a very different time for many reasons, not the least of which was captured in photos found of the Los Angeles, California alligator farm. This park, which operated from 1907 until 1953, consisted of over 1,000 alligators housed in 20 different ponds that the guests were encouraged to enter in order to interact with the animals. There were no safety barriers to protect the guests from the gators, who frequently measured over 15 feet long. Signs warned visitors to not throw stones at the alligators, punch or touch them in any way, but that appears to be the extent of the safety precautions, and photos show groups of people picnicking in the shallow waters with gators swimming around the table. More photos depict other activities that put visitors in close contact with the dangerous in the 21st century. In fact, interaction with the beasts was thoroughly encouraged, and photos show adults and children alike holding, petting, and even lying next to the alligators. The farm was owned by Francis Ernest and Joe Campbell, who captured and bred the alligators and charged visitors 25 cents apiece to get up close and personal with the creatures that we now recognize as incredibly dangerous and volatile. The two men handled every aspect of the park, from capturing alligators from the wild, breeding them, incubating their eggs, and exercising them to maintain peak health. They trained the gators to perform tricks, and gators at the park would go down huge slides, consume live chickens in front of an audience, and even wrestle with volunteers from the audience. Visitors could also purchase live baby alligators from the store's gift shop, alongside handbags and accessories, made from the hide of less fortunate members of the park. Needless to say, California Alligator Farm existed in a world before lawsuits, safety regulations, and animal protection laws, during a time when providing dangerous and thrilling experiences to the public was big business, and as dangerous as it certainly was, it seems that none of the visitors truly appreciated the risks that they were taking. These days, most people would never willingly go near such volatile beasts. and the alligators that do exist in captivity do so far out of reach of any innocent bystanders. It's hard to believe that such a place ever existed, let alone within the last century. Yet photos that have surfaced prove just how involved the public was in this strange park. One photo shows an infant sitting in the middle of an enclosure all alone, totally surrounded by baby alligators. Another shows a small child standing as if totally unfazed, in front of almost a dozen fully grown gators, and still others depict fully grown adults and even children riding on the backs of the animals with specially made saddles and reins. Shockingly, the park closed due to dwindling business that decreased profits and not because of a forced closure brought on by an unforeseen accident. And it is not clear whether any injuries were sustained at the park as a result of such close exposure to the dangerous animals. The existence of the park is almost unbelievable were it not for the photographs, which goes to show once again that a picture truly is worth 1,000 words. Guillaume Benjamin Amin Duchenne Experiment in Electrophysiology. Guillaume Benjamin Amin Duchenne was a doctor, neurologist, and researcher in the 19th century, whose greatest contribution to science is immortalized in a series of bizarre photographs. Duchenne was fascinated by the involuntary contraction of minuscule facial muscles to convey our emotional meanings and mental states, and was certain that discovering which muscles would lead to insight into the unconscious mental well-being of the individual. He then set out in this vein to create a sort of emotional roadmap using the facial muscles to uncover the unconscious soul of man and thus determine whether or not feelings could be truly feigned in the facial muscles. He did this through methodical experimentation in which he used electrophysiology to stimulate different facial muscles to contract in sync with a camera lens capturing the resulting facial expression. The result was a series of photographs of individuals who are clearly displaying exaggerated and almost bizarre emotional reactions brought about by these muscle contractions, proving that the involuntary use of these muscles was indeed impacted by emotion. Duchenne believed that an aesthetic study of the muscles involved in these emotional expressions would benefit artists and performers as well as scientists, claiming that he had captured and idealized naturalism in the same manner of ancient Greek sculptors. He believed in the holistic benefit of studies of the raw emotion that he had captured so much so that when he published his photographs and the resulting findings in his book, The Mechanism of Human Physiognomy, he went so far as to divide his conclusions into 3 sections: general considerations, a scientific section, and an aesthetic section. His work was surprisingly illuminative, and the photographs, which are grouped by emotion, allowed him to define 13 primary emotions and several fundamental expressive gestures and associate each with its relevant facial muscle or muscle groups. The photographs were essential to these discoveries, as the facial expressions resulting from the electrical stimulation of the muscles were incredibly fleeting and could only be truly appreciated by being immortalized in film. In the course of his experimentation, Duchenne made many lasting contributions to science, including developing electrophysiology as we know it, discovering what is called the Duchenne smile in reference to the fact that only true emotions can cause small muscles in the eyes to crinkle into a genuine smile, and even discovering what is now known as Duchenne muscular dystrophy. However, these odd and sometimes grotesque photographs are likely one of the most well-known aspects of his work. And it is easy to see why. Today, the photographs that he captured appear to be living up to his intentions for them as they are studied by scientists and artists alike. Some of the more interesting selections from his book have even been displayed in prominent art galleries across the world as an example of the fine line between art and science captured on film. What do you make of these odd photographs and stories behind them? In April of 1986, in the then Soviet-controlled Ukraine, a nuclear disaster demonstrated to the world the effects of nuclear power outside of military applications. The Chernobyl incident was the malfunction of a nuclear reactor at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, known as Reactor Number 4, located 12 miles south of the border of Belarus and 81 miles north of the city of Kyiv, Ukraine. The disaster caused 400 times more radioactive material released into the atmosphere compared to the radioactive material released by the bombings at Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. This led to the mass evacuation of the region as well as one of the most important responses by the world's governments, in an attempt to help secure and contain the area from further radioactive bombardment. After the dust is settled, all that remained were the remnants of an era lost to time, frozen in place. Even to this day, there are restrictions on where you can visit, with most of the areas around Chernobyl being out of bounds. Incredibly, decades later, various stories have been told about mysterious creatures seen in and around the area. One of the most interesting stories is that of the Blackbird of Chernobyl. After the encounters witnessed in the town of Point Pleasant back in 1966 to 1967, the Mothman would not return for another couple of decades, in which reported sightings of the creature were seen throughout the Soviet Union, but concentrated around the town of Pripyat and at the Chernobyl power plant. There were an overwhelming number of reports in the region, and even witness accounts for those that worked at the power plants that appear to be bothered by the appearance of the creature. According to the residents of the town of Pripyat, there were a number of reports and claims of a mysterious wind creature often seen flying over the town late at night, and this was on a variety of different occasions. However, in the case of the workers at the Chernobyl power plant, there appear to be much more alarming reports that were provided. In the months shortly following the Chernobyl incident on the 26th of April back in 1986, the workers at the plant noticed the same creature reported throughout the town of Pripyat hovering above the plant, and sometimes even resting on the larger towers and areas of construction. What grew more perplexing for the workers were the reported incidents of which people claimed to have experienced harrowing nightmares, and these always involved the creature that would manifest into threatening phone calls of the creature calling them all throughout the night. Many residents of Pripyat and workers at the Chernobyl power plant often described the creature as resembling the shape of a man, with wings and glowing red eyes. This creature would later be referred to as the Blackbird of Chernobyl, and similar to the cases of Point Pleasant, would cease to exist in the region shortly after the Chernobyl incident. The Chernobyl incident is known worldwide as one of the largest tragedies, and potentially the most environmentally damaging of its time, although it appeared that the governments of the world were already prepared when it occurred. The event still saw more than 50,000 square miles of land contaminated with radioactive fallout and being made completely unusable for the foreseeable future. The site of the town of Pripyat and Chernobyl will not be habitable for another 20,000 years. It could very well be that the Mothman was warning us of an impending doom that could have left a much larger amount of land completely uninhabitable for much longer. It's not just this creature that residents couldn't explain. In the wake of the events that unfolded, various residents and workers would go into detail that they saw mysterious unidentified flying objects, and these could be seen hovering above the power plant. Those who have looked into these cases have said that UFOs seem to have an interest in our missiles, and have a highly sensitive air is not accessible by the general public. These unidentified crafts seem to be able to make their way into secure airspaces without being detected, and then suddenly disappear before military planes can get in and investigate. Mikhail Vyrsky, who was working for the Radiation Control Department, said that on the same day as the disaster, he and several other colleagues would witness a mysterious craft hovering above reactor number 4, almost as if inspecting it. His story isn't very well known, but he details his encounter with UFOs guessed from the future. He said the following: "We saw a ball of fire and it was slowly flying in the sky. I think the ball was 6 or 8 meters in diameter. Then we saw 2 rays of crimson light stretching towards the 4th unit. The object was some 300 meters from the reactor. The event lasted for around 3 minutes. The lights of the object went out and it flew away in the northwestern direction." End quote. Incredibly, he goes on to detail that the radiation levels in the area dropped, going on to say the following: "The UFO brought the radiation levels down. The level was decreased almost 4 times. This probably prevented a nuclear blast." End quote. This has caused UFO researchers to suggest that this craft was actually trying to help us. Various military personnel have come forward and said that when tests are being carried out, it's not uncommon to see UFOs in the region. Going on to say this, it's almost like they're watching what we're doing. Another thing that people have allegedly seen in and around reactor number 4 is that of shadow people. Shadow people are defined as supernatural shadow-like humanoid figures that, according to believers, are seen flickering on walls and ceilings in the viewer's peripheral vision. Shadow people are said to be entities of the underworld, but those who have experienced them have said they're not sure whether they're evil, helpful, or just there. Scientists have tried to offer other explanations for the phenomena. For example, Some researchers conclude that seeing shadow figures are simply symptoms of sleep paralysis or deprivation. And others have noted that those taking medicine are more likely to experience these sorts of hallucinations. Alternatively, they can simply be the mind playing tricks on somebody who's experienced a heightened sense of alert. For example, when you're walking down a dark alley at night, however, some people are convinced that shadow people are actually apparitions of those that have passed on. They think that the reason they're in shadow form is because we on Earth can't clearly see them, and therefore find it hard to see these figures. Others have suggested that these entities are often seen in places that have seen hard times. The Chernobyl incident affected many people, and some researchers have said that some of these people may not have moved on from this area, and can still be seen wandering the region looking for answers. So what do you make of these interesting stories? What do you think the blackbird was? Do you think it's linked to the Mothman? And what do you make of the UFO that allegedly brought down the radiation levels in the region? Forest rings. Canada, one of the greatest feats that mankind has achieved during recent centuries is the ability to fly. And this has not only reduced the time it takes to travel, but has also led to some stunning imagery of the planet and new perspectives about various places on Earth. Researchers have also discovered many mysterious phenomena by using aerial photography. In the 1950s, geologists were using aerial photography to study the different parts of the forests near Ontario, Canada, when they found a strange anomaly. It seemed that there were mysterious rings present in the forest. The rings were not visible or could not be detected from the ground. Researchers at the Ontario Geological Survey named these strange patterns forest rings. Upon further research, it was discovered that these large circular patterns were formed as a result of low tree density. The diameter of these rings ranged from 50 meters to 2 kilometers, and they were formed by 20-meter thick lines. Despite extensive studies conducted over the years, researchers have not been able to find the origin of these forest rings. Some of the hypotheses about the phenomenon includes buried kimberlite pipes, fungus that grows radially, and trapped gas pockets. Some researchers have also proposed that these could be the impact craters formed as a result of meteors. However, no conclusive evidence is available to support any of these hypotheses. In recent years, similar forest rings have also been reported in Australia and Russia. Waterfalls of red in Antarctica, definitely viewed as one of the most peculiar natural phenomenons from around the world, is that of the waterfalls of red located in the Antarctic tundra. When a cruise ship passed by a remote location showing off the incredible size of the glaciers located off of the coast of Antarctica, they came across a startling discovery that led to an investigation by research scientists in the area that were at first incredibly puzzled at what they were witnessing. It appeared as if the glaciers were bleeding out a thick red liquid that would spill out into the ocean, looking very similar to that of the consistency of blood. This led to the name Blood Falls, located in Antarctica, as the site looked as if the Antarctic mountains were bleeding profusely into the nearby snow and ocean waters. When scientists analyzed the liquid, they found that it was merely water mixed with a high concentration of a hypersaline body of water trapped beneath a glacier. When the glaciers began to melt, this would release the hypersaline mixture with the fresh water of the snow and oxygen of the atmosphere, which would create a rust-like color in the water and cause it to thicken into a syrup-like consistency, creating the illusion of millions of gallons of blood pouring into the ocean below. Still, the sight can be seen occurring even to this day as the glaciers continue to slowly melt, and can even be scheduled to view on a tourist destination as a part of the Ross Sea cruise line. That has made the site one of its main destination points. For those less fortunate, the site is so large and so long-lasting that images from satellites can see this strange occurrence and can be viewed by anyone wishing to see the site for themselves. The disappearance of Robin Graham. With all respect, the disappearance of Robin Graham is quite literally a Hollywood horror story. The 18-year-old disappeared in November 1970 on the Hollywood freeway in Los Angeles. As the investigation unraveled, things began to get really quite spooky. Graham had been out partying that fateful night and had been dropped back to her car by a group of college friends. After setting off home, she was taken her car stalled near the Santa Monica off-ramp on the freeway. Police officers on their regular loop stopped and offered to call a tow truck for Graham, but she declined the offer and explained she was going to a phone box to call her parents to come and pick her up. After completing the loop, the officers stopped a second time to check in with Graham, where she explained she'd called her parents. Satisfied, the officers drove on. The officers drove past Graham one final time around 2 a.m., but did not stop this time, as they saw her with a dark-haired man, estimated to be in his late 20s, who they presumed to be the family member that Graham had contacted. The officers also observed Robin seemingly willingly climb into the man's car and drive off. This was the last time that Robin Graham was ever seen. At around 2:30 a.m., Graham's parents arrived at her car to find it locked, empty, and abandoned. And the patrolling officers who had seen her drive off explained to her parents that, in line with protocol, they had not intervened. Investigators quickly began to link Graham's disappearance to a series of chilling abductions of young women in North California in the few years before the incident. After reading the Los Angeles Times coverage of the disappearance, a woman came forward to the authorities with an eerily similar story to that of Robin Graham. She explained that she had been stranded on the Hollywood freeway earlier that same night when she was approached by a man driving a light blue Corvette who claimed that he was an off-duty policeman and offered her a lift. She refused the offer and was later to identify the stranger that she and possibly Robin had spoken with as a man named Bruce Davis. Davis had a sinister backstory, being heavily linked to the Manson family, a murderous cult in California. However, the police were more interested in Bruce Davis, suspected of being the deranged Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer haunted North California between 1968 and 1970. In truly sadistic, Jack the Ripper style, he would haunt the press with cryptic messages expressing his love for killing humans. The killer was known to strike on the full moon. In a supernatural twist, and like many of the killer's victims, Robin Graham disappeared on a full moon night. Whatever happened to Robin Graham? A very clear message emerges from the events on November 15, 1970. Never accept a ride from a stranger. The Vela incident. The Vela satellite is located near the Prince Edward Islands in the Indian Ocean. It was constructed as a reaction to the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, which ensured that nuclear reactors or explosions could not be tested anywhere due to the deadly and detrimental effects of nuclear energy. The Vela satellite is able to detect nuclear explosions and send signals to intelligence agencies to warn them of the presence of dangerous and illegal nuclear energy. The Vela satellite is equipped with technology that can detect X-rays, neutrons, and gamma rays by using bangmeter sensors. It is an extremely advanced piece of technology and essential for both human and environmental safety. On September 22, 1979, the Vela satellite detected the infamous double flash, indicating that a nuclear explosion had occurred. This detection on the satellite is now commonly known as the South Atlantic flash. The flash lit up the sky not only once, but twice, and was remarked as an incredible natural event. However, the true cause of the double flash remains a mystery. The United States and other countries alike predicted that the Valor satellite flash might have occurred due to natural phenomenon such as a meteor crash or lightning strike. To investigate this further, meteorological technology was introduced into study but was unable to detect whether nature was responsible for this. This technology was unable to prove the exact cause for the detonation. However, it did show that a wind had occurred over the southern Indian Ocean that might have carried nuclear explosive radiation or chemicals to certain parts of Australia. After an investigation from the United States Department of Defense within the Indian Ocean and surrounding countries, they predicted that it is possible that a nuclear test had occurred within the region of South Africa or Israel. But there was not enough evidence to conclude that a nuclear threat was present. There are several conspiracies as to why the Valor satellite detected a nuclear explosion. Investigators believe that the United States might be covering up the reality that Israel and South Africa might have access to nuclear power and that they might be working together to create nuclear weapons. These same investigators claim to have evidence that the United States Department of Defense came across conclusive evidence that a nuclear explosion from these regions really did occur, but that they chose to ignore it to not draw attention to their international conflicts with the region. Recognizing that Israel and South Africa might share in nuclear power is a dangerous idea for the United States. There are certain ulterior motives for the United States to disguise this information from the general public. However, upon further investigation into South Africa's nuclear power industry, officials believe that the South African government could not have made such a powerful nuclear explosive within the time frame that it went off because their access to nuclear power at the time was limited. South Africa was also a part of the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Because of this, they allowed foreign parties to view their classified documents revealing the kind of nuclear access they had. Because South Africa seems clean on its own, it gives precedent to the possibility that they collaborated with Israel to test this nuclear explosive. The United States has yet to confirm or deny this possibility. Luna Water Mystery. A lunar water stream has been reported as water being spotted on the surface of the moon by an efficient spacecraft likely to have originated from an anonymous source in lunar inner parts. This was made by NASA's Moon Mineralogy Mapper instrument aboard India's Chandrayaan-1 probe, which reveals the first detection of such magmatic water from lunar orbit and gave no doubt to analysis performed not too long ago on moon rocks, brought to Earth by Apollo astronauts not less than 4 decades ago. The lunar water stream was observed as there was evidence that the moon has water and hydroxyl, a more reactive relative molecule than of H2O. But commenters debate about the source of the water, whether it is widely or evenly distributed and how much might be present. As has been confirmed, the moon doesn't have significant amounts of H2O or OH in its atmosphere most of the time. But when the moon passes through one of these meteorite streams, enough vapor is ejected and visible to detect. Detecting how much H2O and how much OH are present is something future moon missions might reveal. NASA detected the vapor using its neutral mass spectrometer, a device built by Goddard. The mission orbited the moon from October 2013 to April 2014 and collected detailed information about the structure and composition of the lunar atmosphere. The meteoroids had to penetrate at least 3 inches below the surface. Below this bone-dry top layer lies a thin transition layer, then a hydrated layer where water molecules were likely stuck to soil and rock called regolith. From the measurements of water in the exosphere, the researchers evaluated that the hydrated layer has a water concentration of about 200 to 500 parts per million, or about 0.02 to 0.05% by weight. This concentration is a lot drier than the driest terrestrial soil and is persistent with earlier discoveries. It is so dry that it would need to process more than a metric ton of regolith in order to collect 16 ounces of water. Because the material on the lunar surface is fluffy, even a meteoroid that's a fraction of an inch across can penetrate far enough to let out a puff of vapor. With each impact, a small shock wave fans out and ejects water from the surrounding area. When a stream of meteoroids rains down on the lunar surface, the released water will enter the exosphere and spread through it. About 2/3 of that vapor escapes into space, but about 1/3 lands back on the surface of the moon. Often the new discoveries made are huge and monumental, broadcasted all over television and spoken about for years, but others are much gentler stories, perhaps a little less phenomenal and with a more wholesome twist, flying under the radar without us having noticed them. So today we'll be taking a look at 3 interesting finds and the stories behind them. Boy discovers tank from World War II at bottom of a lake. In Estonia by Lake Kurtna-Maitashov, a local young boy stumbled across some peculiar tracks that appeared to lead towards the lake, but were never retraced. He decided more investigation was necessary. With Lake Kurtna-Maitashov being objectively too small for activities such as boating, coupled with its remote location, the tracks were certainly a point of curiosity. What could they possibly be from? Why were they leading to this lake? The local boy continued his observation over the next couple of months, noticing air bubbles spitting out from within the lake. He and a team began to delve deeper into the clues that they had at hand and pry more to see what else they could find out about these unexplained tracks. They definitely did not expect to retrieve a 1940s military tank from their small local lake. The track, well ground into the dirt, coupled with the slow and continuous stream of bubbles, was certainly a cause for question. Though the sighting of these air bubbles led to the involvement of authorities to see what was behind this unusual occurrence. The process began at 9 a.m. to remove this colossal mystery item, with the weight clocking in at 30 tons, taking 8 long hours to move and the employment of giant steel cables and heavy-duty equipment, including a 68-ton bulldozer. When it became clear that the team was excavating a full-sized military tank, many locals were left with plenty of questions. The gigantic tank was clearly from the Second World War, marked and identifiable through the markings along it. Having inspected the markings a little closer, this tank appeared to be a Soviet-built tank, AT-3476A, left in near-perfect condition before being taken over by German soldiers and eventually abandoned in the lake in order to prevent enemy forces from being able to access it. The tank has been fixed up, restored, and repaired. It has now been restored to its former glory. World War II love letters wash up on New Jersey beach. A love story sure to melt your heart, certainly fit for a Disney film, unfolded in the November of 2012, though it starts much earlier. In 2012, after the havoc wreaked by Hurricane Sandy, a 14-year-old boy, Patrick Cheney, was walking along the disturbed beach trail or Sandy Hook Bay in the Atlantic Highlands of New Jersey with his family, when something rather peculiar caught his eye. Patrick's mother, Kathleen Cheney, said, "I wanted to return them to whoever they belonged to," and embarked on her mission to trace the original recipient of these 57 thoughtful and affectionate love letters. Patrick took the letters home and dried each one in front of the fireplace, taking care to not damage them and restore them as best as he possibly could. When she began looking for clues, Kathleen began to place a picture of this couple. A young woman, Dorothy Fallon, wrote to her fiancé, Lynn Farnham, in the run-up to their wedding, and every word of every letter told a story of love, romance, and care. Their letters were dated from 1942 to 1948, with one 1948 letter reading, "Well, darling, 2 weeks from today and we will be married." As Kathleen read, she pieced more and more of the puzzle together, though still could not figure out exactly why this couple had been kept apart, with no mention as to why Lynn Farnham was in Vermont. When Kathleen visited the address printed at the top of the letters, believing this return address could lead her to the home of Dorothy Fallon, but on arrival found that it had been torn down. Left without the discovery of new clues, Kathleen took to Craigslist, posting an advert to try and catch the eye of a relative, perhaps, but received no reply. The next step in this mission was to visit findagrave.com, where she found Lynn Farnham, who reportedly passed away in 1991. She left a posting under the site page, and a niece of Dorothy and Lynn got in touch from Virginia. A phone call with apparently plenty of tears and the revelation that Dorothy, aged 91 in 2012, lived in New Jersey, Asbury Park, in frail health conditions. There were plenty of promises to get the letters back to the family as soon as possible. Dorothy's niece explains the appearance of the box there was rather peculiar, with no relatives living within the area. It seems the letters floated down the Shrewsbury River, washing up on Sandy. "I love you, dear, and miss you very much. All my love always, Dottie." This wonderful story had a relatively happy ending, with Dorothy receiving her letters safe and sound. Fake skeletons in the Colorado River. In 2015, 2 skeletons appeared in the Colorado River, placed neatly on lawn chairs, causing quite a scare to local authorities. A couple from Phoenix got more than they bargained for when their lighthearted prank ended up with the authorities investigating remains. A man who had been snorkeling in the Arizona and California bordered river spotted the skeletons 40 feet underwater. The frightened snorkeler called the local authorities, believing they were genuine human remains. Though luckily, it was apparent to the Buckskin Fire Department diver that checked it out that these skeletons were not real people. The couple were called in to the La Paz Country Sheriff's Office to report on the matter. Lieutenant Kurt Bagby reported that the couple thought they might be in trouble, bringing a photo with them as proof as to them being the pair behind the skeletons. Bagby goes on to explain that there was no intention to file charges against the couple for this, as it was relatively harmless after all. Despite the giggles it has given many, Bagby says that generally actions such as these are discouraged. These skeletons were suited and booted, donning sunglasses, sat on lawn chairs and holding signs, one of which said, they were also dated August 16, 2014, leaving them undetected for nearly 9 months. Some, including Bagby, have speculated that Bernie is in reference to Weekend at Bernie's, the hit 1989 film, featuring the main characters, insurance corporation employees, aiming to convince others their deceased boss is still alive, losing and finding him several times through the duration of the film. One scene depicts Bernie's body falling off the boat and into the water, possibly forming the underwater skeleton scene featured in the Colorado River. Reportedly, this was not a one-time event for the couple, admitting they had a third in their trio of mischief. Each had been down numerous times to clean up Bernie and adding the second skeleton in March 2015, dubbing her Bernadette. Without the intervention of federal agencies, the skeletons will remain in the river, as was hoped by those who placed them there, or as Bagby described it, a geocache for divers to try and find. But the story does not end here. In 2016, the diver who stumbled across the skeletons on their launchers took it upon himself to gain vengeance, removing them from their watery tea party. Martin Scholl, the diver to discover these skeletons in May of 2015, feels as though his involvement in the chaos played. When his friends asked as though he had heard of the skeletons in the Colorado River, he was disappointed and shocked to have to tell them it was him who stumbled across them. Yet he was not mentioned in a single media report despite just about every morning show mentioning the bizarre event. Disappointed with the emphasis on Bagby, the country sheriff, who pointed out it is unwise to assume someone would be happy with press coverage including their name, Scholl decided to take his revenge. The bony cast of this soggy tea party were lifted out of the river, taken by Scholl to his home balcony. He said he would be willing to return them after Halloween had passed, much to the disappointment of many. What had begun as a weird little joke had become a fun attraction to recreational divers. The sheriff's office said that yes, it is not illegal for Scholl to take them, but they weren't his to take and people sure hoped they were not missing for life. What a creative yet strange way to bring a smile to people's faces, even if this story involved a believed discovery of human skeletons and the taking of them too. Whether it is a sense of community spirit in uncovering a wartime artifact, the reuniting of a woman with the love letters she once wrote, or a community giggling at some strategically placed skeleton decorations, each of these finds brightened up someone's day and hopefully brought a little light to yours. But what do you make of these 3 finds? One of the most long-standing legends in all of recorded history, and arguably the most popular tale of advanced ancient civilizations in modern-day culture, is that of the lost city of Atlantis. This mystery has stood the test of time. Atlantis' popularity is not limited to its philosophical roots, at least in relation to its not-so-recent adaptation as the home of the famous comic book hero Aquaman. It's so popular, in fact, that it even has its own dedicated field of study within the realm of pseudo-history, a landology accompanied by a research database known as Lantopedia. Recorded history presents us with this story in the time of the ancient Greeks, via one of the most prolific philosophic writers, Plato. Atlantis was founded by Poseidon, who fell in love with a human known as Cleito. Together they had 5 sets of twins, whom of which eventually came to develop and rule over the 10 different provinces of Atlantis. It's believed that as time passed, these rulers slowly divided up portions of this fabled land in order to create a legacy between each family. The Atlanteans grew to be an advanced civilization for its time, far ahead of all other civilizations surrounding it. They were known to be much more developed in maritime navigation, city infrastructure, military pursuits, and even agriculture. The actual city of Atlantis is known to have been a main citadel in the center, surrounded by 6 concentric rings, 3 of water and 3 of land. In the dialogue, Plato described the city of Atlantis being 50 states from the sea, which translates to just under 6 miles. Atlantis was connected to the sea via a canal, which was 300 feet wide and 100 feet deep, and ended at a harbor near the settlement. The actual continent of Atlantis was explained by Plato as being larger than Asia and Libya combined, with the plains surrounding the city being approximately 230 miles wide and 345 miles long, and with a large range of mountains at the northern end of the continent and smaller mountains surrounding the rest of the center plains. The entire continent was described as being rich in soil, plant and animal life, elephants included, and having reasonable temperatures for sustaining these life forms. Throughout the dialogue, Plato does not cease to chronicle aspects of Atlantis down to the finest details. He speaks of the main palace in the center of the city, elegant bathhouses, temples, statues of gold and silver, gardens, housing for both people and animals, guardhouses, and even racetracks. Balls were worshipped and viewed as divine in the city of Atlantis and roamed the streets freely. Plato then goes on to describe other settlements of people in the surrounding areas of the continent, but simply labels them as wealthy farmers and country folk. Plato explains the military setup by the city of Atlantis. He goes into great detail about the various roles filled by members of the ancient city in its hierarchy, all the way from king down to citizen. Although the details of Atlantis have been passed down, one question remains. Where is it? Various theories have been put forward to suggest why Atlantis suddenly vanished. Those who believe in the ancient city have said it reached its peak around 900,000 years ago, but internal battles caused the city to be lost at sea. In recent years, many have come forward and said they think they've found the mythical city, and one of the ways they've done this is by using things like Google Earth. The most recent one was found by a man who said he was searching Google Earth. He said that he is certain that these underwater structures are proof that the lost city once existed. This discovery was made 1,245 kilometers or 773 miles from Virginia Beach in the United States. However, other researchers have said this isn't where Atlantis would have been, noting that it would have been a lot more north. Regardless, others have brought into the idea that Atlantis could have somehow moved along the seafloor. Another idea is that a giant flood could have taken out the advanced city, and even moved it to a different location. This does raise an interesting question. Why do so many cultures have similar stories about floods? One theory is that these floods actually took place sometime around the end of the last ice age. This correlates with Plato's description of the destruction of Atlantis, as told by the Egyptian elders 9,000 years before Solon went to Egypt in 600 BC. This is where scientifically proven geological findings come into play. It has been proven that approximately 11,600 years ago, the Earth did undergo massive rises in sea level. For this theory to make sense, Atlantis would have had to have existed during the last ice age, and at the end of this era there may have been pole shifts which led to multiple natural disasters. Some researchers have speculated that some survivors of this ancient maritime civilization may have reached out to surrounding civilizations like Egypt and Africa and the Incan and Aztec empires in South and Central America, and even as far as Babylonia and Sumer and even India. All these cultures have stories of men appearing after a cataclysmic flood. Thorfinn Osiris in Egypt, Pharaoh in Inca, Quetzalcoatl in the Aztec Empire, Vishnu in India, and Ensi in Sumer. Perhaps these Atlantean survivors traveled to these places, and being so advanced they were accepted as gods and influenced each culture's history as such. One idea that supports this theory is the discovery of pyramids and pyramid-like structures in each of these areas. Perhaps the survivors spread their knowledge of pyramids in their alignment with the stars, in the hopes that future civilizations would gather the clues and solve this mystery. Another theory is that Atlantis was actually destroyed at the end of the Bronze Age. The explanation for this mix-up in historic timelines can be found in ancient Egyptian timekeeping. The Egyptians used both solar years as well as lunar years for keeping time. While solar years lined up with 365 days a year, lunar years are measured in months. If the Egyptian elder who told Sol on the story of Atlantis was speaking in terms of lunar years, meaning 9,000 months instead of years, this could have lined up with the end of the Bronze Age. So what do you make of these recent underwater discoveries? Could it be possible that these structures are ruins of ancient Atlantean empires? Until we learn more, Atlantis will remain a mystery of the world. Historians that study ancient people and their lifestyles, especially those in Egypt and the Middle East, have long looked to the Bible as a sort of historical roadmap to provide a starting point in the search for ancient artifacts and archaeological sites. Although the Bible is the religious guidepost for Christianity, several parables and tales within it are based on actual historical events that can tell us what life was like all those years ago. Difficulty lies in finding evidence that can help us determine which aspects are embellished and which are accurate historical occurrences. So today, we'll be looking at 3 interesting biblical discoveries that shed some light on previous events. Studies in ice cores found in Mount Kilimanjaro have revealed that a drought did take place 3,600 years ago. Although the biblical story of Joseph is one that is well documented not only in the Christian Bible but also in the Torah and the Quran, it has generally been treated as a highly dramatized story, very loosely based on possible historical events that are intended to teach a lesson rather than act as a definitive record of what occurred. However, some compelling evidence has emerged in Egypt that seems to indicate that there might be more truth to the story than first believed. The story begins with Joseph, the 11th of 12 sons, who was highly favored by his father Jacob, much to the irritation of the 11 other brothers. He was gifted a token of this favoritism in the form of a lavishly colored coat that sparked the jealousy of his other brothers. The Bible says that the coat was colored with red and purple dyes, which were the most prestigious and valuable colors in the ancient world due to their extreme cost and difficulty in procurement. Faced with such a blatant display of partiality and frightened of the meaning behind strange dreams that he kept having, Joseph's brothers sold him to an Egyptian slave merchant and returned the coat to Jacob, smeared with goat's blood and claiming that Joseph had been killed. Once in Egypt, Joseph was imprisoned, but his continuing prophetic dreams and skills in interpretation allowed him to gain the attention of the Pharaoh, who was troubled with disturbing dreams. Joseph said that the Pharaoh's dreams indicated that there were to be 7 years of plenty in Egypt, followed by 7 years of famine, and he was given the task of advising the Pharaoh in preparations for the years of famine. During this time, Joseph rose through the ranks of the Egyptian court and quickly became one of the most prominent members of the government, as he oversaw grain storage and preparations to see Egypt through the impending 7 years of famine. There has never been a record of any high-ranking Egyptian during this period who was called Joseph, and because it was highly unlikely that a foreign serf could reach the ranks of top advisor to the Pharaoh, it was always thought that this story was more of a richly embellished parable than a factual tale recounting actual events. However, a recent discovery in Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania has lent some credence to Joseph's story. Mount Kilimanjaro is the source of the Nile River's water, and the Nile River was, and still is, the lifeblood of Egypt. Without it full and flowing, crops and livestock would weaken and die, and famine would spread across the land just as Joseph predicted in his interpretations of the Pharaoh's dreams. That there was a massive drought that took place about 3,600 years ago, around the same time that Joseph would have been advising the king. Additionally, a canal that was built to keep the Nile River branches open and flowing, and that allowed the tribute trees around it to remain fertile, did such an excellent job that it is still in use today and functions successfully. Nobody knows who built the canal, but its Arabic name has been passed down from ancient times by the people who live nearby and translates to the waterway of Joseph, leading many to believe that it was built by Joseph in an effort to reduce the impact of the famine. While we may never know which parts of the story are true and which are myth, it certainly seems that these historical discoveries lend credence to the biblical events. The Osiris of Carthage, also referred to as Joseph ben Carthage, is a biblical figure who is notorious as the Jewish high priest that presided over the Sanhedrin trial of Jesus and was instrumental in the plot to kill Jesus. He is mentioned several times throughout the New Testament, and his existence is a matter of historical fact due to the writings of Josephus, who was a first-century Jewish extra-biblical of Carthage rule as high priest, and what some of his responsibilities in this position might entail, referring to him as Joseph, who was called Carthus of the high priesthood. However, although the role of high priest was one of great prestige, Josephus does not describe details that occurred during his reign, other than that he ruled in a very turbulent time. The Bible spends much more time discussing one aspect of his priesthood, that is, his involvement in the eventual crucifixion of Jesus, which has been highly documented throughout the New Testament, making him one of the key individuals in the Christian story of Jesus' death and subsequent resurrection. Despite being such a notorious public figure, historians had been unable to determine the final resting place of his body, or even further evidence as to whether he existed at all. This was until some new evidence emerged in the 1990s, with the discovery of an elaborately carved stone ossuary containing the bones of what was determined to be a 60-year-old man. The ossuary, although decorated with intricate designs, was labeled with a somewhat haphazardly carved inscription, "Joseph's son of Carthage." Was this at last the body of the infamous high priest? Historians are divided on the matter. Some say that because the inscription is only lightly engraved and does not mention his title as high priest, is highly unusual for someone with such a highly regarded position, the body inside cannot be assumed to be that of Carthage. However, supporters of the ossuary point to the fact that the box dates to the 1st century and is of an appropriate age to contain Carthage bones, as well as the fact that the elaborate carvings excluding the inscription are incredibly ornate and could only have been done by a skilled craftsman. Such a design would only have been able to be afforded by someone of Carthage's ranking. If anything, the Carthage ossuary only throws more mystery onto the matter of who lies in the great stone chest. Is it really the infamous historical figure or merely a wealthy individual who had the misfortune to have his tomb vandalized with somebody else's name? Only time will tell. Jesus' childhood home in Nazareth. In the 1880s, nuns building the Sisters of Nazareth convent stumbled upon an ancient cistern, which they immediately began evacuating and salvaging. Finding important archaeological remnants in these lands where humans have been settled for thousands of years is not altogether uncommon. So at first the nuns were not aware of exactly how important their find could be. Has confirmed that the site was the location of many changes throughout the years. Besides the cistern, there was evidence of a dwelling of some sort dating back to the 1st century. It is also believed that the site had been used as a quarry and a tomb. There are also remnants that point to its possible use as a cave church and that a Byzantine church had been constructed above the site. University of Reading archaeologist Ken Dark has studied the cave church could be the one that's mentioned by Egeria, a pilgrim in 3080 AD who recorded her travels to the Holy Land. He also suspects that the old Byzantine church may be the Church of the Nutrition, which was built to commemorate the place that Jesus Christ was raised and previously thought lost forever, as it burned down in 1200 AD, and the site was not used again until construction of the Sisters of Nazareth convent began. Of course, if the church really is the Church of Nutrition, that leads archaeologists to conclude that the buried dwelling might very well be the former childhood home of Jesus of Nazareth, and evidence strongly suggests that this is the case. The church matches records from historian Adamnan in the late 7th century that mention a large, elaborately carved building over a crypt with 2 Roman tombs on either side of Jesus' childhood home. Underneath the remnants of the lies the tomb and the house, just as records say. Dark described the discovery and comparison of the remnants with Adamnan's records, saying, it overlay a crypt. In the crypt, just as he says, there are 2 Roman period tombs, and between them there's a house, and that house, Adamnan says, is the place where Jesus was brought up. So we found the church, we found the crypt, we found the house. While historians agree that all signs that the remains are truly those of the Church of Nutrition, not everyone is entirely convinced that the ancient remains below are truly those of Jesus' childhood home. Dark goes on to say the following, I can be confident that this is the house that the Byzantines believed, and was probably believed in the 4th century to be Jesus' childhood home. Only time will tell whether the site truly was the place where Jesus Christ himself was. We must continue the search for answers. But what do you make of these 3 biblical discoveries? Are you convinced? Shaquille O'Neal is best known for being a former American basketball player. However, a few days ago, he shared an interesting video that got people talking. The video in question shows Shaq driving around at 3 a.m., and in the background is what looks like a mysterious beam of light. He then uploaded the video to Instagram asking his followers what they thought it was. It then sparked various theories for what he had captured, ranging from UFOs to more mundane explanations like a light show. This person said the following, I've seen similar looking beams out in the Nevada desert. I know some of these can be explained as things like hotel lights or natural phenomena, but this one is interesting. I'm not sure where this one was taken, but it could have been coming from a hotel. Regardless, it's still an interesting video. End quote. Another person said this is an interesting video. I have no idea what the mysterious beam of light is, but why is no one talking about the black objects moving in the background? There's so much going on in this video." End quote. However, others were certain that the video showed nothing odd. This person said the following: "The black thing you can see moving in the background is just a street lamp not lit up. There's also other light anomalies in the video that can likely be explained as lens flares. The beam of light is of interest, but there's likely an easy explanation for it." Interestingly, this isn't the first time that a strange beam of light has been photographed. Last year, various photographs started to make the rounds on social media, showing strange beams of light. Interestingly, these strange beams of lights had been showing up in various places across the world, and this has caused several eyewitnesses to give their opinions on what the lights could be. One man said the following: "While on the way to work, I saw what appeared to be a giant beam of light open up in the sky. This light wasn't the same as the natural light piercing the clouds. It was massive and really bright. I got distracted while heading to work, which eventually caused me to be late, but I couldn't miss the opportunity to see this mysterious light. I have no idea what it is, and I could also see other drivers pointing it out as they were driving by. It was like something from a movie." Interestingly, this isn't the first time these strange beams of lights have been reported. Last year, residents in Rockwell, Texas reported giant booms and lights in the area. Those who witnessed the event said it illuminated the sky, and that it didn't just happen once. Skeptics suggested that what people were reporting was just the sun shining through the clouds. But residents countered this and said if this was the case, then the beam should have spread to the horizon. But in this case, it didn't. It was very direct. Various photographs then started to reach social media, where thousands of people started to give their opinions on the mysterious lights. One resident said the following: "As I was driving, I noticed this distinct light coming from the sky. Caught my eye as it didn't look natural. I'd never seen anything like it before. I had my mum in the car and she was surprised as well. The beam of light was very distinct, and it didn't look like it was the sun coming through the clouds." End quote. Another witness said the light certainly did look weird, but I think I've seen something similar. We call these God rays, but they do usually have more light rays than this. This one seemed to be one giant one." End quote. Scientists have come forward with a possible explanation. They've suggested it could be an anti-solar ray. These rays are parallel shafts of sunlight from holes in the clouds, and their apparently odd directions are a perspective effect. As of right now, more of these photos are being shared around, with some of the most recent ones coming from New York. Again, these lights are similar to the ones that's been reported, but are noted as being larger. Oddly enough, those who have looked into these reports have said they've even been seen close to the International Space Station, with one researcher saying they were watching the International Space Station live cameras when they saw a large red beam of light come from an object. When the image was shared, people couldn't agree on what had been captured, with some people saying it was likely a camera anomaly, while others went down the route of suggesting that it could have come from an unidentified flying object. UFO researchers pointed out that in the photograph you can even see a large circular object, and this appears above the beam of light, saying that the reason they suggest it's a UFO is because every other week strange objects can be seen close to the space station. As of right now, NASA and other space agencies have denied that UFOs have been seen close to the ISS. But how much do researchers who spend countless hours watching the live cams disagree? So what do you make of this interesting video? And what do you think is creating that mysterious beam of light in the background? In recent years, many interesting discoveries have been made in and around Antarctica. It's tough to even visit this hostile location. Researchers have found that journeying anywhere across the continent proves to be a life-threatening and nearly impossible journey, as the blowing winds, dry air, large deserts, and constant ice quakes make any form of safe passage an impossibility. Research bases constructed across the icy continent must also be able to stay mobile, as the buildup of ice would swallow buildings. Despite this, many have questioned what's really going down in Antarctica. For many years now, people have said they've discovered strange-looking artifacts buried within the snow. But this recent discovery is said to be one of the best ones made in recent years. The discovery shows over 50 objects, with some saying that they can see tire tracks with skid marks leading up to the objects. Theories for what they are have ranged from secret government crafts to things like crash UFOs and even monoliths. Someone just sent me this video. As you can see, this isn't just an odd artifact in the snow. Whatever these things are, they seem to be quite large. And as some amateur researchers have pointed out, they've only just turned up. Those who have zoomed in to get a better look at the objects have said that some of them even look like monoliths. This then led some to theorize whether they could be linked to the strange monoliths that were being found a few months back, with others saying that whatever these things are, they must be big because they're giving off large shadows. These things are not small. The largest row of objects measures in at just over 870 meters. So the question is, what are these things? Due to them only recently being discovered, it's not likely we'll get an answer. Also, as some have pointed out, when these types of discoveries are made in Antarctica, we never get an answer for what's found. Most skeptics say that what people have found are things like snow and ice, and that these have likely fallen off nearby mountains. Strangely, there's no mountain areas close to these objects, so it seems unlikely that these are pieces of snow or ice that have fallen off. These photographs have already started to be shared on social media, with people giving their opinions on what they think they are. One person said the following: "This has to be one of the best anomalies that's been discovered in Antarctica. What I find odd is that when you zoom in on each of the lines, all of the objects are the same. In one row, it looks like there's all monoliths. In the next row, it looks like there could be tanks. Then in the final row, it looks like these could also be military vehicles. Something to note, though, is that these haven't been here very long. So it's unlikely anyone will be able to give us an answer for what they are." End quote. Researchers who search Antarctica have said that these relics could be evidence of a past ancient civilization. And one of the reasons why we haven't seen them before is because they were buried beneath the ice. This has caused researchers to say that if this is the case, then there's no way they were created by modern humans, but rather an advanced race yet to be discovered. Further saying that if this is the case, then there's more artifacts waiting to be found. Amateur researchers have also said that if you spend long enough looking around the deep crevices in Antarctica, you'll likely find evidence of what appears to be unidentified flying objects. Now, it's important to note that scientists and researchers have said that what people are seeing is just eyes, and in some cases, pareidolia. But those who have spent countless hours looking to these reports have said this isn't what's being seen. Taking a look at these strange structures, these researchers have said it's fairly obvious that they hold many characteristics with sightings of commonly reported unidentified flying objects. Could this discovery be proof that going back many years ago, a much more powerful advanced civilization, with the means of producing such megalithic structures, could have inhabited the region long before humans even reached it? An interesting fact to take into consideration is the history of the region. What many people do not know is that Antarctica was once a lush and dense forest, with a population to match long before it became the wasteland it's most notably known as today. Evidence of this can be found when looking at a team of archaeologists and researchers that led an expedition in Antarctica in November of 2016 that lasted for several months, ending in January 2017. The team found incredible evidence of lush forests in the region after locating and identifying a large amount of fossil fragments. This was from ancient trees that dated as far back as 260 million years. So what do you make of this recent discovery in Antarctica? To the mystery and tragedy of the Titanic, whoever thought that larger ships could ever sail the seas? Fast forward today, and the largest cruise ship, the Symphony of the Seas, is a whopping 5 times larger than the Titanic. In fact, its massive size could fill almost 7,000 passengers compared to the Titanic's 2,200 passengers. In 2019, 30 million people alone were expected to hop aboard cruise ships for their trips. According to the Cruise Line International Association, The worldwide output was over $134 billion alone in 2017. Cruise lines were just as good for the economy as they were for tourism. The industry was booming, and for good reason. What could be better than sailing around the world, eating unlimited gourmet food, and being able to constantly relax and unwind on the ocean? After all, going on a cruise is arguably the perfect vacation. Most people would agree, but not quite everyone. If you put thousands of people together onto one big ship for a few weeks, you've either got a recipe for a trip of a lifetime or an impending disaster waiting to happen. For the hundreds of thousands of cruise trips that sail across the ocean waters every year, not all of them go without their fair share of mysterious and suspicious events. From overboard passengers and lucky occurrences to scary disappearances and suspects. So today we'll be taking a look at 3 mysterious discoveries on board a cruise ship. Disney to the rescue to save passenger overboard. If you are on the Carnival Sensation cruise ship on a Tuesday night, you might have expected to hear the sounds of adults drinking at a bar, the calmness of the ocean waves, or the shrieking of kids as they rung along the boardwalk. However, what you did not expect to hear was the argument that began to ensue and clash between a man and a woman within their room. It got so bad that the man threatened to hop overboard. The woman further egged him on believing that he would never actually follow through. All of a sudden, the sound of a man falling over a balcony into the swirling pitch-black ocean waters was heard. What follows is the sound of instant regret. In other words, the man begins to cry for help as soon as he makes impact. Soon the Carnival Sensation ship stops its course along the ocean as not only turns their spotlights on but tosses several markers into the water as well. It was at that moment when a nearby cruise ship, the Disney Wonder, noticed the spotlights in the distance. In a split-second decision, the ship decided to change its course and lend a hand by sending out its own rescue boat. By then, it had already been an hour. If the man was still out there, in the surprisingly calm ocean waves, they would have to find him fast. Quickly springing into action, the Disney Wonder told all its passengers to remain quiet so that they could hear whatever cries of help the man was making. After a scary situation, the lifeboat crew finally located the 34-year-old and pulled his tired body up to safety. It had been almost 90 minutes at that point, and he had been treading water all alone in the darkness. Upon meeting the man, the captain of the Disney Wonder noticed that he had completely shifted moods. He was an angry man and now was a man grinning from ear to ear. That is exactly how you would feel if your life had just been saved. Just to make sure he was okay, the unidentified man was sent to the hospital for a final mental and physical checkup. If the Disney Wonder ship had not been nearby, perhaps the man would have sunk under the water, never to be found again. Disney's magic might just be more mysterious and wondrous than we ever thought. George Allen Smith IV disappeared on his honeymoon. George Allen Smith was only 26 years old when he set out to a honeymoon aboard a Royal Caribbean cruise ship with the love of his life, Jennifer. What was supposed to be an adventure of a lifetime filled with everlasting love resulted in pure disaster. As soon as their ship, the Brilliance of the Seas, was sailing in waters between Greece and Turkey, the newly wedded groom disappeared overboard. The captain believes it was an innocent accident. However, Smith's parents believe in their minds George Allen Smith's life was taken from him and was not an accident. Immediately, they set up a $100,000 reward for whoever could reveal anything about a perpetrator. Yet there was more evidence and circumstance to consider before any formal declaration could be made. A ruckus of drinking and gambling was ensuing at the casino. That was not even half of the story. A passenger who was staying next door to Smith believed he heard intense arguing on the Smith's balcony that same evening. Another passenger claimed that they heard furniture moving. Later, Jennifer was found completely passed out in the hallway. Early in the morning, other passengers snapped photos of what they believed to be mysterious, but nothing was especially worth incrimination until a video featuring 4 men surfaced to the Smith family attorney. While passing the camera around, the men comment about Smith's death and flash gang signs, yet none of the men ended up being charged. It is not surprising that they denounce having any involvement with the case. Believing the case was just a pure, untimely accident in the end, the FBI in Connecticut dropped the case, much to the family's dismay. What further angered the family was the fact that all of the Smiths' boat belongings were going to Jennifer, who had remarried since the accident. In a Facebook post, they expressed their anger about how her whereabouts during his death was unknown, and that she was trying to stop them from finding out what really happened that day. The suspicions about her were never pursued. Many years later, we still do not know what happened on that fateful day of the 5th of July 2005. Was it a murder? Or was it an accident? Perhaps we will never know. Fariba Amani disappeared while on a cruise with her boyfriend. The last thing you would expect while on a beautiful tropical cruise between the Bahamas and Florida is to disappear without a trace. However, that is exactly what happened to beautician Fariba Amani while on a cruise with her loving boyfriend. A disappearance was reported by none other than her boyfriend, Ramiz Galshani, whom she apparently had a tumultuous relationship with. Naturally, suspicion was cast onto him as prime suspect. Even Amani's sister said that Amani was thinking about breaking up with Galshani before the trip occurred. Galshani had a different story. The night before he reported her disappearance, he left for the casino at about 1 a.m., while Amani went straight to the gift shop. As soon as he arose in the morning, he claimed that she was nowhere to be found. Even though authorities never labeled him as a suspect, Amani's family did not put his story behind him. Saying that she was never drunk, they firmly believed that her disappearance was not accidental. Galshani had never tried to contact them either, which further affirmed their doubts. He claimed that he was very tired, exhausted enough to even refuse an interview with the Vancouver Sun. However, he reiterated that he wanted Amani safe and sound back home. If she did not return, she was leaving 2 kids behind. After a search was conducted of the cruise ship that carried more than 1,100 passengers, there was no trace of Amani at all. Even the ocean waters near the Bahamas and Florida produced no results once the Coast Guard finished trawling the area. In the end, only a burning question remains. Was this a murder at the hands of her boyfriend, or was it simply an accident? It's a mystery that just might remain unexplained forever. So what do you make of these interesting stories? Sightings and demonic possession is a tale as old as time. Records indicate that hauntings, demons, and witchcraft have always seemed to plague humanity. You can find tales of the supernatural in nearly every society. One recent study even claimed that out of 488 societies worldwide, 74% believed in possessions by spirits. All of these reports have led to some people even going on to investigate haunted locations and trying to find the reason why so many people report seeing mysterious entities. The topic is controversial to say the least. Scientists and researchers have said there's no proof that ghosts and other entities exist, while believers have said their encounter was enough proof of that. Many cultures believe that when you pass on, your spirit goes to another plane. Back in 2013, Harris poll found that 43% of Americans believe in ghosts in the afterlife. This study and fascination with ghosts has also led to various people capturing some mysterious photos. One woman was lying down and decided to take a photograph of her cat. It wasn't until she reviewed the image that she noticed there was something odd in the background. She said the following, "I took this one photo of my cat as he was sleeping funny and I thought it was cute. In the hallway, there is a black apparition. This is no way a reflection image or a shadow of any objects. The photo was taken on my iPhone 4 with no flash. The property that I reside in is over 100 years old and I have experienced a lot of activity. I have many other photos of figures in the hallway and other phenomena taken around the house. The activity ranges from faces appearing in the mirror that I have on video and photos of, horrid smells such as silver, taps turning on doorways opening, footsteps in the hallway, voices banging, clapping, whistling, and lights turning on and off. Sometimes my cats become restless looking out into nothing." End quote. Those who have looked into similar cases have said this is actually quite a common occurrence when it comes to hauntings, saying that many people have reported encountering these mysterious shadow figures. As of right now, though, Researchers can't seem to agree on what they are, and this is because each person's experience seems to be different. Some people have claimed they see the shadow person during things like sleep paralysis, and that the event can leave a lasting impression on them. Some describe how they see a shadow-like figure in the corner of the room, and when they try to get up and run, they can't. Going on to say it's like they're pinned to the bed. And while this is happening, this mysterious figure is getting closer and closer. Others, though, have said they've seen shadow people around their house, and that most of the time they tend to keep to themselves. It's these different reports that have caused some to say that they're not entirely evil. Between 8 and 50% of people will experience this terrifying phenomena at some point in their lives. 5% will even experience it more than once. Sleep paralysis overtakes you when you're in a state between sleep and wakefulness. A person is alert, but unable to move or speak. It's as if you're in sleep mode and your body knows it, but your brain is alert. And if sudden, unusual paralysis wasn't enough, sleep paralysis is often accompanied by a strong sense of fear and hallucinations. Most commonly, sufferers have a strong sense that someone is in the room with them. The hallucinations experienced by sufferers span a wide range of times, including auditory, visual, and tactical. Sleepers may hear humming, hissing and buzzing, or even whispers and inaudible voices. They feel like they're being dragged out of bed or pressed upon by a heavy force. They see a terrifying dark figure looming at the foot of the bed or lurking outside the window. The hallucination is accompanied by a sense of fear and panic and can last up to several minutes. Sufferers have described it akin to seeing a ghost or being haunted by an evil entity. Overall, the experience is terrifying. Even scarier, the physical causes of sleep paralysis are not completely known. There are a few theories, including disrupted sleep cycles, either lap of the REM or rapid eye movement. Fades of deep sleep and then waking stages of sleep may cause a disconnect in their brain. Even though the cause of sleep paralysis has not been discovered, the phenomenon is still used to try and explain many supernatural occurrences. For example, some researchers claim that sleep paralysis can cause out-of-body hallucinations, as well as the belief in a demonical alien presence. A theory is that many alien abductions can be explained by cases of sleep paralysis. While this may apply in some cases, it certainly isn't a definitive answer to the things that people experience in their sleep. The fact remains that sleep paralysis is a phenomena that demands further study before it can be used as an explanation for unusual happenings. One chilling story was told by a woman who said she saw one of these shadow figures crawling up her bed. She claims that she closed her eyes and upon opening them it vanished. But as she looked up to the ceiling, she said it was hanging upside down. A hollow, raspy voice spoke so loud that it sounded like it was inside their head. It told them that they were marked and then vanished. What's terrifying is that many people have described having the same dream and have gone on to say that after they wake up from being pinned to the bed, they are still able to see a mysterious figure in the corner of their room, with some saying that after their first experience it feels like this figure has now attached itself to them as they now start seeing it on a regular basis. So what do you make of this interesting photo? Do you think she captured a shadow person? Or is this something else? Also, have you ever experienced a shadow person? From ancient history to out-of-this-world phenomena, there's no shortage of mysteries to explore. Today we'll be taking a look at artifacts from an event that forever changed the world almost 8 decades ago, as well as 2 phenomena in our upper atmosphere that rarely occur on planet Earth. In honoring the past and acknowledging a future rich in mystery, there's plenty to be excited about, no matter if it's deep underground or well beyond into the darkness of space. Here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at these 3 recent discoveries. Men discover World War II weapons. Even though World War II happened almost 80 years ago, it's an event that continues to have lasting effects. The casualties were so devastating that nearly 3% of the world's population was lost. Though over 60 million people have passed away since this event, the memories of the war have still carried on in those who did survive, as well as the thousands of artifacts that remained. However haunting they may be, but they served to remind us of just how terrible the consequences of the war were for the soldiers who never made it back home. Yet many of these artifacts lay underground. Thanks to the work of two Russian friends who went exploring in the Russian countryside, these artifacts finally began to reveal themselves. Once they stumbled upon the sites of old battlegrounds, they began to dig into the earth. Soon they found some startling artifacts that had never seen the light of day in decades. One of the first objects was a fully intact handgun. Next they came across some grenades that thankfully did not explode upon impact. At first these two friends didn't even realize who owned these artifacts until they held in their hands a golden crest engraved with a clear swastika and some German text. It read, "My honor is loyalty." They had unknowingly just stumbled upon artifacts that had once belonged to the Nazis. Without further ado, they kept on searching. They found several landmines with triggers in place and toxic leaking substances, wisely deciding to leave them alone. More guns were found and surprisingly, most were still in perfect working condition. However, because the surrounding area used to be a battlefield of immense bloodshed, it also became a mass gravesite. The two friends discovered the remains of many soldiers who had died in the war. One such skeleton that was unburied still had their boots tucked on their feet. The men searched on trying to fulfill their curiosity. Large storages of ammunition, machine guns and rifles were found among all the weapons. Yet it wasn't just weaponry that the friends uncovered. They also located lots of helmets and unopened meals and sodas that would have been consumed back then for survival and protection. In the end, the war wasn't without its terror and destruction. Gas masks and silences embedded in the ground served as reminders of the dangers that went on. These soldiers all had to leave their loved ones with the possibility of never coming back. For many, that was a cold reality. Behind a few chamber pots, the two men discovered a bright wedding band that had been left behind by a deceased soldier. Naturally, controversy remained far after the expedition was over. Should the two men have left the scene once they realized what was there? Or were the artifacts worth uncovering for the sake of human curiosity? Mysterious Alaskan radioactive particle. On a flight from Anchorage to Hawaii, scientist Dave Murphy was on a mission to discover what kinds of particles were in the atmosphere on behalf of the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration to figure out how air pollution was affecting our climate. Of all the thousands of particles he collected, he certainly wasn't expecting to find an enriched uranium particle. As soon as he analyzed those samples after landing back on the ground, he knew that the uranium particle wasn't naturally occurring. It was the type that would be found in dangerous nuclear weapons and fuels, like the weapons that were dropped on Japan during World War II. How and where did this mystery particle come from? After further research, Murphy guessed that the particle must have originated from somewhere in Asia and was carried all the entire way over to Alaska and particle dispersion. Yet, he couldn't distinctly point to any one country. Even so, he reassured everyone that the atmospheric uranium particle wouldn't need to raise any concerns or worries. In fact, it was so tiny in size that it couldn't have been seen with a small optical microscope. If Murphy took another flight again, he stated that it was rare enough that he most likely would never see another one again. In the meantime, it is a mystery that's waiting to be solved and already has some revolving theories. Some experts believe it's from North Korea and their nuclear tests, but there's no solid proof yet. The particle could also have been from past nuclear accidents like Chernobyl or Fukushima, but it's unlikely to have been floating in the air for so long ever since. In the end, it's possibly just a small source of uranium that scientists have yet to truly understand. In the hopes of one day capturing its true origin, Murphy had published a paper about his findings. His research may potentially change how we view our atmosphere as we know it. Space hurricane over the North Pole, whatever you do, you don't want to get caught in a land hurricane. These torrential natural disasters typically bring over raging thunderstorms and strong winds that can knock you straight off your feet. Yet what about a space hurricane? Believe it or not, these types of hurricanes do exist. In fact, a 1,000-kilometer plasma space hurricane was found over the North Pole and confirmed by scientists as the first occurrence ever recorded. Even though it's labeled a hurricane, it actually has nothing to do with the stormy tropical hurricanes we're so used to hearing on the news. For one, terrestrial hurricanes take place in Earth's lower atmosphere, while space hurricanes occur in the upper atmosphere. Additionally, they're made from a combination of magnetic field lines and solar winds that are composed of the sun's rapidly moving plasma. As soon as the magnetic lines will warp the winds into a spiral shape much like our own ground hurricanes. However, instead of rain that's being poured down, we're getting a shower of electrons instead. What's even more unique about these space hurricanes is that they're invisible to the human eye. Scientists only know that it occurred thanks to the help of 4 satellites that detected it as it stormed on for almost 8 hours. They found that the charged particles of the hurricane quickly became a funnel with a similar eye shape at the very center. In the end, even though there are plenty of resemblances to the land hurricanes we are used to, space hurricanes are still incredibly rare, at least that is for planet Earth. It's theorized that space hurricanes are actually pretty common on other planets. As for our home planet, we don't need to be as worried about space hurricanes. It turns out that upper atmospheric phenomena represent little danger for those of us who live in the lower atmosphere. But of course, they still do have some effects on systems we use, like GPS, radio signals, and satellite drag. If you ever experience some errors with your GPS or radio systems the next time you're out on the road, chances are you might just have a space hurricane raging right above you. What do you make of these 3 recent discoveries? Stranger Things first hit our TV screens in 2016 with Netflix fans sitting down to enjoy a sci-fi series that engaged the masses. Whether you're rooted for these teen romances or watching for the action scenes, this series had something for everyone, including the scientists and conspiracy theorists among us. Whilst many shows have fan theories spouted from eagle-eyed viewers, far fewer hear direct confirmation that the speculation is true. Stranger Things creators Matt and Ross Duffer stated they wanted the supernatural element to be grounded in some way. So today, we will be looking into 3 strange scientific explanations and events that are based on real events. Project Stargate. Project Stargate was the discrete name given to a CIA mission aiming to develop psychic abilities, not unsimilar to those we see Eleven demonstrate throughout the Stranger Things series. This highly secretive project was carried out from 1978 until it could no longer be hidden in the 1990s. Stranger Things fans paying close attention will notice that the Stargate mission covers the 1983 time span we know Stranger Things is set in. This project looked into manufacturing the supernatural and manipulating the human mind into gaining psychic abilities to be used in the military and for spying purposes. One of the biggest focuses for this project was the psychoenergetics. This is described as a mental process in which, through heightened cognitive abilities, an individual is capable of changing the characteristics of an item, usually its position, without physically interacting with or touching the object. Throughout Stranger Things, we consistently see Eleven, also known as Elle, move items with her mind time and time again. The researchers on Project Stargate report having had partial success with telekinesis and remote viewing. With some limited success being seen, the CIA files seem to encourage the use of these psychic abilities, but only alongside and as an informant to more concrete evidence, decisively stating that this is not a definitive nor accurate enough to be a standalone, sole source of evidence. What has been dubbed remote viewing has earned its spot on the show too, as we see Elle tune into the conversations of the Russian spies in the series, accessing a conversation she is not physically present to hear. Stranger Things is not the first media piece to portray the Stargate project on screen, with the book and film The Men Who Stare at Goats also representing subjects being asked to look at animals in an attempt to destroy them. This film uses goats, whilst we see Elle asked to destroy a cat just by looking at it during her time in the Hawkins lab in Stranger Things. Whilst the project had ended in 1995 and information was declassified and available through National Archives, these files and documents only became accessible online as of 2017. Could there be people out there who truly have mastered the abilities we see Eleven news throughout the series? Project MKUltra. Project MKUltra, otherwise referred to as the CIA Mind Control Program, is the name given to a series of experiments conducted upon humans by the CIA, many of which were illegal, unethical, and dangerous, beginning in 1953 and lasting until the mid-1970s. The information gained from these investigations were designed to force participants to give confessions via mind control. Participants had their mental states and brain functions manipulated, many of which being unwitting and unknowing US and Canadian citizens, believing they were undergoing treatments for anxiety. Subjects were given high quantities of psychoactive substance alongside electroshocks, hypnosis, maltreatment, both verbal and sexual isolation, and as shown to us in Stranger Things, sensory deprivation. You might be asking at this point, where does this link into our favorite sci-fi show? Well, Stranger Things Season 1 has shown U.S. Drive Brenner experimenting upon Eleven and her mother. The premise is that Elle's mom was an MKUltra test subject during her pregnancy, having been tortured with sensory deprivation and substance-related remedies. This horrific turmoil resulted in Eleven acquiring some unforeseen skills, the telekinetic and telepathic abilities we see her showcase throughout all 3 seasons so far. Nods to sensory deprivation are made continuously throughout Stranger Things, not just when we get the details of Elle's gripping backstory. Numerous times on screen, Elle uses a sensory deprivation tank to access, strengthen, and develop her psychokinetic gift. In the show, this lets her see into different dimensions, though it serves as a gesture to the pain her mother went through and the trauma very real MKUltra test subjects experienced. While this government information has been kept classified in real life, not the show, we have gained a gradual insight as the years have gone on and information has been less closely protected and even declassified. In 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms enforced that all files and documents from the MKUltra experiments were to be destroyed. In a surprising turn of events, 1977 revealed 20,000 remaining documents regarding the project, discovered through a request for the Freedom of Information Act. Surviving information was officially declassified in 2001, with gruesome details still being uncovered surrounding the project in late 2018. One letter declassified within 2018 told us that 6 dogs with brain implants had been controlled through a remote control, forced to run, turn and stop, with heavy implications for these plans to be transferred to humans. So why try and enforce mind control experiments at all? Allegedly, this was an attempt by the USA to gain an upper hand in the events of the Cold War. This has been largely confirmed, with Project MKUltra being a reactionary project, aiming to manufacture mind-controlling medicine to employ upon the Soviet Union, after claims circulated that the Soviet Union, China, and North Korea had used mind control techniques on American prisoners of war throughout the duration of the Korean War. The project was a product of paranoia and fear of communism, in a desperate, illegal, and truly evil attempt to create truth medicine or even sub-projects designed to erase memories. Though never carried out, detailed plans had been drawn up to make the project called Perfect Concussion by the U.S. Navy. So whilst it is evident and plain to see, to us Stranger Things fans, that poor Eleven and her mother were subjected to true horrors, it is more disturbing to know that real Americans and Canadians underwent these same experiments in a corrupt attempt by the CIA to perfect mind control. The Montauk experiments, the Camp Hero base in Montauk, New York. The Montauk experiments are of a nature far more debated than those previous, with their existence being questioned time and time again, weaving a web of suspicions, accusations, and conspiracy theories. Regardless as to just how believable this set of studies truly is, their presence in Stranger Things is undeniable. Whispers of the Montauk experiments have begun to arise, since the 1980s, gradually gaining momentum. It is rumored that this project is a series of experiments carried out at the Camp Hero Air Force Base in Montauk, New York, and has encompassed research delving into the creation of psychological warfare and mysterious investigations such as time travel. This conspiracy was sparked when Preston Nichols and Stuart Swerdlow both gave confusing accounts, raising many questions and discussions about the events of Camp Hero. Both men said they had managed to regain and recover memories that had been repressed from their time being involved in the Montauk experiments, with Nichols even suggesting that he had been abducted and held against his will in order to encourage and enforce continued contribution to the research. Some of the events considered to have taken place at the Camp Hero base include time travel, teleportation, mind control, contact with alien life, and faked moon landing images. These claims have been documented in the book series The Montauk Project, written by Preston Nichols himself. This book has unsurprisingly been labeled as fictional, though this has not stopped avid believers and fans insisting there is some truth. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't remember time travel in Stranger Things. Alfred Belak, a man supposedly involved in the Montauk experiments, explains that the research into time travel consisted of a hole being torn open in hyperspace, confined to Montauk but allowing travel between 1983 and 1943. Belak warns that there was an ever-present threat of this hole engulfing the planet, one which could only be rectified by him and his brother destroying the equipment used. So whilst the Montauk project, should it really have ever existed, tore holes in space to travel through time, the Stranger Things gang sees a hole torn in space that threatens their hometown spreading through Hawkins. Bialik's warnings about the Montauk experiment do not end here though. He explains that his brother had begun to age rapidly as a side effect to this experiment and had to transfer the soul of Duncan to a new sibling's body. This bizarre story does not help the credibility of the Montauk hyperspace time travel as far as many are concerned. We may never know if the Montauk experiments were real, but the theories definitely impacted the show, with Stranger Things once having the proposed name of Montauk. Whether it will lead to space travel or the upside down, holes in hyperspace don't sound like a great idea. Whether you find these revelations to be exciting or terrifying, such a scientific and factual influence being present in this, frankly quite horrifying show, is certainly testament to what mankind is capable of, for better or for worse. But what do you make of these three experimental stories?